Since the beginning of mankind, people have desired to be remembered for certain deeds they have done in their life and in a way become immortal. Some have achieved that goal by writing these moments down. Because of these actions, people today are still aware of many events that happened years ago. We know about these individuals in history because they wrote their experiences and thoughts down. One of these individuals was Marco Polo.
Here begins the introduction of this book, which is called The Description of the World. Lords, emperors, and kings, dukes and marquises, counts, knights, and burgesses, and all people who wish to know the different generations of men and the diversities of the different regions of the world, then take this book and have it read, and here you will find all the greatest marvels and the great diversities.
Marco Polo was an individual who challenged the ancient world through the tales he told in his travel diary, and in doing so, single-handedly changed the way that Europeans viewed Asia and themselves. Marco Polo was born in 1254 in Venice, Italy, where his background laid all the foundations for who he became. The name Polo comes from a family of traders. Marco Polo's father, Niccolo, and his uncle, Maffeo, were both traders, and they left for Asia when he was 6, and he did not see them again until he was 17. While Polo's father and uncle were away in Asia, his mother died, so he was raised by his Aunt Flora. She taught him basic skills such as how to read, write, and do arithmetic. Since he came from a family of traders, his aunt taught him about foreign money and how to judge foreign products. By the time Marco's father and uncle came back in 1271, he had an education in accounting, foreign languages, and knowledge of the Christian church. Polo was also interested in the natural world. During his travels, he accounted for everything he noticed.
Marco Polo's career as an explorer began when his father and uncle took him through the Mediterranean Sea to Jerusalem, then to Armenia and the Persian Gulf. There, they had planned to take a boat to China, but the boats they planned to use were mutilated, and the weather was very dangerous, so the travelers continued on land through Afghanistan, Tibet, Turkestan, and the Gobi Desert before finally reaching the coast of China. All in all, his trip totaled an amazing 12,000 miles one way. During his journey, Marco Polo recorded his exotic findings and discoveries of the area in which he traveled. These findings would prove to revolutionize life as the Europeans knew it, by opening up China to the West and by giving new ideas from China to the West. As Elizabeth Hammer of the Metropolitan Museum said,
Marco joined his father and uncle on a journey that would last 24 years and take him more than 24,000 miles, and further than any of his European predecessors.
Asia defied all that had been taught to Polo about it. Contrary to many European beliefs, it was not a land of barbarians, but rather people who were perhaps even more advanced than Europe itself. Asia was cleaner than Europe. The streets were paved, and there were many bathhouses. This struck Polo because people in Europe seldom bathed. Asia was also much safer than Europe. There were firemen to keep fires under control, and policemen to maintain law and order. At the time in the 13th century, the great Kublai Khan had just completed the conquest of most of East Asia. This impressed Polo very much. In his book he wrote,
If you put together all the Christians in the world, with their emperors and their kings, the whole of these Christians, aye, and throw in the Saracens to boot, would not have such power, or be able to do so much as this Kublai, who is lord of all the Tartars in the world.
Marco and his uncle and father lived in Khan's courts for many years, and Polo was appointed as the regional ambassador of China. This was the first time a European held a governmental seat in Chinese history. As regional ambassador, Marco Polo spent part of his life visiting different parts of China and reporting whatever he saw to the Khan. This gave him even more information to bring back to the Europeans many years later. John Hubbard of Macalester College wrote,
Details that the young Polo observed included regional histories, description of cities, architecture, inhabitants, races, languages, and governments. Also described are people's different lifestyles, diets, style of dress, marriage customs, rituals, and religions. There are further accounts of the trading practices, crafts, manufactured products, plants, animals, minerals, and terrain.
Polo wrote everything he saw down in a travel diary. He would one day bring that diary back to Venice, where it would eventually be published and become a guide for many later explorers. However, when Polo returned to Venice 24 years later, the tales he told about Asia were vehemently rejected.
The stories he told were so foreign to Europe that no one dared to believe him. According to Polo, paper money was used as currency instead of metals like gold and silver. The Asians also burned black stones, known as coal, for fuel, and there was an organized and efficient postal system. All these stories were rejected, and Polo acquired the title of the Man of a Million Lies. But what made Marco Polo so special? He was by no means the first European explorer to discover China. In fact, many previous explorers probably saw similar inventions and ideas when they traveled to China. No, what made Marco Polo so special happened long after he left China. 3 years after Polo was back in Venice, he commanded a galley in a war against a rival city, Genoa, and was captured for a year. Locked up in a dull jail cell, Polo could do nothing but despair for his life. To keep himself from going mad, he spent his time dictating his experiences to fellow jailmate Rustichello of Pisa, who wrote it down. This book would later be published and become Marco Polo's greatest legacy of all. Marco Polo's book was published as Il Million, or The Discovery of the World. Many famous explorers, such as Christopher Columbus and Henry the Navigator, used his travel journal as a guide. For Christopher Columbus, depending so heavily on Polo's accounts would eventually lead him onto the Americas and what would become the United States. Also, Prince Henry the Navigator, who is known for the myriad expeditions that he led, admired Polo greatly. He was quoted to have said admirably,
He was the first traveler to trace a route across the whole longitude of Asia, naming and describing kingdom after kingdom.
The Chinese inventions that Polo brought back to Europe, like paper money, coal, eyeglasses in the form of ground lenses, and gunpowder, is still relied very heavily upon. Paper money is now the currency of Europe. Coal serves as a very useful fuel. Eyeglasses aid those with difficulty seeing, and gunpowder has metamorphosized the military into a much more efficient and stable security force. Even now, there are many signs of Polo's legacy. In 1851, a three-masted clipper ship was built in St. John, New Brunswick. It was the first ship to sail around the world in less than 6 months, and was named Marco Polo in reference to the explorer's travels. There is a statue built in Hangzhou, China, dedicated to him, and sheep that were named Marco Polo sheep after the explorer. Marco Polo finally passed away in 1324. However, he was granted immortality in a way. The accomplishments Marco Polo achieved were staggering, but the legacy they left behind are simply incredible.
I believe it was God's will that we should come back, so that men might know the things that are in the world. No other man, Christian or Saracen, Mongol or pagan, has explored so much of the world as Messer Marco, son of Messer Niccolo Polo, great and noble citizen of the city of Venice.
Marco Polo was one of the most prominent and influential explorers in history, because of the courage he showed both in his journey and in his final bitter days. This courage is a trait that lies in every human being, waiting to be lit. Anybody can change the world. All they need to do, like the many eminent historical figures, is to step up.